Hey everybody, welcome again to Work in Progress. This is the show where Reno Collective dives into topics about work, life, and everything in between. My name is Colin Loretz, and today we have with me our community manager Rachel Kingham, and
Hello.
we're joined
Sorry.
by Cami Evans of CamGia.
Hey guys.
Speaking of interrupting Zoom calls.
There'll be some of that tonight. We'll try our best. I'm really excited just about this conversation tonight. We're talking about the docudrama from Netflix called The Social Dilemma. It's something that we've been talking about in and around the collective here, and it's something I think that's on all of our minds with what happened, last night with the presidential debate, with what we're seeing in online media today. Everything from social media to the devices that we have in our pockets and in our houses. So I think this will be a really great conversation. And before we start, I want to have Cami introduce yourself and just give us a little sense of what your perspective is from the social media side of things.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Cami Evans. I'm the founder of CamGia, my social media and community outreach marketing company. When I watched this documentary, honestly, I'm like, what am I doing? I don't even want to do this for a living. I feel kind of torn. So I thought to myself, how can we take a negative like this and use it and turn it into a positive? So my thought is to create a campaign called Social Media for the Good. And in taking these algorithms and essentially retraining them to share content that is healthy, that is positive, that isn't full of misinformation.
Yeah, and I think
Nice.
for those of you who haven't seen the show yet, I'm going to do a quick recap of kind of some of the points that they mention in it. And I would say this is obviously a piece of content that Netflix has put out to get people to watch it. It's from one perspective, and what we're going to try to do is break down our perspectives, our experiences, what we've seen. And obviously, there's, like most documentaries, it comes from the lens of whoever has made it, whoever has been interviewed. But the four key things that we kind of took from this, or I guess what the social dilemma tries to push is one, the theme of addiction to devices. So they really focus on a family. It's like a dramatized, this family unit where the kids are all on their devices except for some reason,
Mhm.
like one of the siblings
Yeah.
is like giving all the other siblings a hard time about it. So addiction to devices, especially by kids. The second one was online bullying and this pressure to kind of meet the standards of either beauty or happiness or whatever that like highlight reel of like look at what everybody else is doing, and their life is perfect and mine's not, and these things that people are putting out into the world. The third one is really the ability for misinformation to spread, for conspiracy theories and radicalization of certain ideas to develop in a way that is not fact based, or because it's online it's true. And this is where we do hear a lot of people throwing around the words fake news and things like that, because there really is such a thing as fake news, but we have to be able to figure out how to parse through what's real and what's not. And then finally, this is kind of running through the entire documentary, but the idea that tech companies are largely driven by ads-based business model, and that ads-based business model is what you were talking about, Cami, where the algorithms are trained to focus on that business model, which is really driven by time on site, number of clicks, number of eyeballs, not necessarily the well-being of the people who are consuming the content, right? It's not optimized for
Right.
happiness. It's optimized for profit for shareholders. So those are kind
Right.
of the four anecdotes. I just wanted to kick us off from there, and I'd love to just kind of get both of your guys' initial take on the movie, how you felt after, and then we can start to drill into some of the actual problems and maybe even what we might think of as solutions.
Well, I wanted to put a little bit of context into this one, since all three of us are users of social media and also content producers of social media. So, Colin, I know like you have done in the past content production, content generating for companies, but you're primarily right now a user. I'm primarily a user with, again, some content generation, Cami is primarily a content generator, but also a user. So there's an interesting sort of different levels that we each have with how we interact and use social media ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm a software developer, so I am also familiar with a lot of the tech that they talked about in the
Right,
movie. I
right.
think there's a little bit of it that was a little sensationalized because, or in some cases, like revisionist history, where it's easy for them to say, "Oh, look how smart we are. We made a thing that convinces people to do something that they didn't think that they were going to do in the first place." And that's more like in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, people are addicted to likes and this dopamine hit and things like that that makes them feel good. But I think we can definitely talk about like the more of the tech side of it. Rachel, I know you also come from like, the parent side of it, watching how your
Right.
kids are growing up with this kind of stuff. And then, Cami, your business revolves around this, and your clients look to you for what does an ethical use of social media look like, and how do we use it to grow our business? Because I do think that this is not all bad. I think that there's some things that it got pretty good as far as social media and technology in general. I think the other thing to think about is um, if your company like Google, Amazon, whoever is running their business based on ads, do you want to put the Amazon speaker in your house? Do you want to have a Google Wi-Fi in your house if at the end of the day all of those are devices that can collect data on you and be used to target you for certain things?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so Cami, what were your sort of initial thoughts when watching it? And I love the social media is a good part.
Yeah.
When you watched it and you were thinking about how it does reflect on what you do and what choices you make.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always kind of had this in my head even before watching it. I've always been like, social media is completely straying from what it was originally intended for. And that was for lighthearted photos, sharing little videos, connecting with your friends and family. And now it has taken this really dark turn, it seems. In to be honest, I rarely get on Facebook anymore because I am so sick of hearing the political rants. I'm so sick of seeing everybody's comments under the Colo posts. Everybody is bullying one another. We've just opened up this dumpster fire, basically. The lightheartedness is seems to be gone. So I migrated all of my business accounts over to this ad account that I created years ago. So when I'm working throughout the day, really the only content I'm seeing on Facebook is conversations on my business pages because I got completely burnt out. And now I'm
Smart.
starting to see a lot of those political rants, the bullying migrate over to Instagram. Instagram kind of used to be a happy space. It's like you scroll through, you see photos of dogs and kids and families, and now I'm starting to see ads in the stories. I'm starting to see sponsored posts on the political side, and it's like, do I want to get rid of my Instagram? I'm kind of getting over this, and I didn't even sign up for TikTok, and I work in the industry, and people are saying, "Oh, you don't have a TikTok? What are you doing?" And I'm like, I don't want one.
Yeah.
I'm done. I don't want to spend any more time on
Well,
the screen. It's
and the
exhausting.
the TikTok situation is a
Mhm.
whole other data privacy issue that the movie doesn't really even touch on, which
Yeah.
is that it's owned by it's by a company from China, and what sorts of things the Chinese government can do with that data in terms of being able to seize any data, including American data. And there's some people who are not super worried about what that looks like, and I think that the interesting conversation to have here is whether or not it's it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I would say being able to connect with friends and family, like you said, is obviously a good outcome of this. The cons are, the idea that honestly most of social media has polarized the content that you're talking about, either political things or opinions, to the point where people are at each other's throats all the time, whereas before you could have a civil discourse around politics and it wasn't like that side sucks and this side is better or vice versa. And so a lot of it though does stem from, and in the movie they talk about this, where YouTube and companies like that, they want you to stay on as long as possible to serve you as many ads as possible. So if you're watching that flat earther video on YouTube and it's really long and you watched all of it, we're going to give you more of that. And suddenly the things you're
Right.
seeing match what you're consuming, right? Your reality becomes what you're watching, and they're just going to keep giving you more and more of that. Now, the irony here is that we are streaming on YouTube, Twitch,
Right.
Facebook, and Twitter right now. But
So enjoy.
that's one of the powers of what we have, right? This is another one of the
Right.
pros, I think, that we can have this conversation on here. We can bring people into that conversation and actually discuss it rather than just consume that, Netflix documentary and then just be like, okay, well, that was fact. And
Mhm.
so, for those of you who may not know that the earth is not flat, sorry to burst that bubble, but
Well, and one of the things that really resonated with me in there, and I think it is connected with having children, but was the idea that they're not sitting around giving two hoots about what you're watching. What they care about, they being the businesses behind it. So the Facebook, the YouTube, what they care about is how much time you're spending, how much you're consuming in total. They don't care what you're consuming, unless, of course, it does have a direct correlation with them. I would assume that Mark Zuckerberg does care when people are watching pro versus anti Facebook or social media videos. But the idea of just the consumption, so not caring how vitriolic and how aggressive people become and how divided we all become based on the content. What matters is that more people are consuming more of it. And it's like this big meter, like everyone's connected to this clock that says, okay, well, until this person has reached 4 hours, just keep pounding them with this content because it'll keep them hooked. And the idea, I forget who it was that said it. Tristan Harris was sort of the main character, if you will, of the Social Dilemma. And he might have said it, but it was talking about attention and the idea that our attention span was what was for sale. And that was sort of, I don't know, it was a bit jarring to me thinking about my own kids. So it's not, I care about what content they watch, but the platform doesn't care what, they just care how much, and then gathering the data that's involved in. And maybe it was naive of me to think that the content did matter, but yeah. So that bothers me.
So John Butler is commenting something that they did mention in the documentary, which I liked too, which was that there's only two industries that call their customers users: illegal drugs and software.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's very much a dopamine hit. And what you're talking about is the attention economy, right? That we either need to, if they haven't been in the app in 4 hours, to send them a push notification about their friend having posted a photo about their vacation. And that's like, well, I'm going to go, maybe I'm doing something else, but I get that notification. I want to go see what it is. Or it might be another notification of, a new friend, a conversation, whatever it might be. I guess it's a good question to ask you here. Like, what do you think about how you're going to approach social media and tech use at home with your kids, Rachel, in terms of, in the documentary, they talk about, oh, my kids aren't going to be allowed to use this stuff until they're 16. In some ways, it was almost pushing this notion of like digital abstinence, which I don't really believe in, because you need to be able to teach kids how to use these things in a smart way. Like, I love that Apple now is giving you reports on your usage. Like, this is how long you used your phone this week, and it's up or down, and you spent most of it on Instagram, so maybe we should put a limit on that this week. That way you can learn a little bit about what you're actually doing. You might be like, oh, I'm only on there like an hour a day, and it's like, well, in reality it's actually a lot more than that.
Your own awareness of where your attention is going. It's funny is you just set like chills up my spine because of the way that you said that instead of digital abstinence, and this isn't a discussion for this platform or for this show, but something for listeners to think about. When you think about digital abstinence and you're thinking you should inform, kids shouldn't be completely off of it. They should know how to use it. And it makes me think of two things. One is sex.
Yeah.
Do you tell kids how to not get pregnant, right? Second is guns. Do you teach a child how to use a gun and be safe with a gun in order to prevent not good usage? So that's not for us, I don't want to play in there, but that just sent like goosebumps because I thought, shit, like that,
Yeah.
excuse me, those things are like becoming equal. And it was supposed to be pictures of dogs and food and vacations. And now, like, we're talking about social media, sex, and guns. It's all like suddenly equal. And,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's, yeah.
but there is a lot of anxiety and depression that is coming from the use of these tools, and that's
Right.
something that Chamath, who is in the documentary, he was the head of growth at Facebook. He is known as being the guy who got that lever to just tilt in Facebook in terms of getting everyone and your uncle, your mom, everybody on Facebook. And even he's speaking out about the point where it's like it was never meant to be this big, right? That it can be big and it can still be about all those things, but anything now, like we were talking about, the algorithm is trained not for the benefit of the users, but for the outcome of dollars and cents and time on site. And so, if we could disconnect the business from, or we could disconnect Facebook from the ad model, disconnect Instagram from the ad model, you probably would see a lot different things. But you also have to be aware of, I guess, any of those rabbit hole tendencies. Like if you catch yourself going down a rabbit hole, like realizing like, did I want to go here, or is this taking me on a trip?
And I think we're seeing that, especially in politics right now. We're seeing this huge divide. I mean, no one is being heard because, whether you're pro Trump or you're pro Biden, you watch a video about something good Trump did or something good that Biden did, and then slowly you're being fed little breadcrumbs down these separate holes, and you can't hear or see anything else. It's like these algorithms are like, oh, I heard you liked one thing about Trump. Let me give you some more.
Yeah.
And then you're over here.
Yep.
Same with Biden. You're over here. And all of a sudden you are in these rabbit holes, like you said, Colin, and you simply can't see the other side. And so something else somebody says just infuriates you because you're like, what do you mean?
Right.
And it's dangerous. We shouldn't be getting our news from social media anyway.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, one of our members sent me a link to, I think he's an ad agency, and Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark Manson. And so one of the things he had talked about is, well, one of his arguments with social media is that we are already inherently flawed, and social media has found a way to enhance those things that we're already like, we already have a tendency to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't encourage that. Like, instead of giving me the breadcrumb and then a little bite of bread and then a slice of bread, and then here's the whole loaf, you are now completely on this side. There is no undecided, which, by the way, I keep hearing people say undecided. And I'm like, how could you not be decided? But in this day and age, like we're so, so divided, but it was already a natural tendency to pick a side, I guess. And it can be any side. It can be politics. It can be various other things.
It could be, yeah. I mean, even science right now. I mean, the pandemic has shown a lot of this as well. And we now hear people talking about doom scrolling, right? It's because we can easily go read a bunch of stats about our city, and then we go click on another article, and then we see everyone arguing about masks. And it's very easy to just continue to scroll. I think the thing that Chamath was talking about in the documentary was that we've confused the value of likes with self-worth. And so what happens is, especially for young impressionable people who have not yet developed a true sense of self-worth or sense of identity, they see the highlight reel. And I think these are very the show, the documentary, and even what we're talking about right now is like a lot of different branches of things that we could talk about, because there's this perception of reality on Instagram and Facebook and like the highlight reel. But then there's also, in some ways, if you remember the internet before we had some of these things, you would just get ads that had nothing to do with what you were interested in. Personally, I actually enjoy getting an ad for a thing that maybe I was looking for, or I don't appreciate it when I like said it out loud and suddenly I get an ad for it. That's a little crazy, but at least they're things that I care about. And like they know that, I have been on certain sites based on my Facebook pixels and all these different things. There's some of that that's not necessarily bad. And, even in doing this show, I've gone down so many rabbit holes on streaming and video gear and audio equipment. And I would not say that any of that was bad. I actually loved that I was able to find new creators, find new content, and I think all of that is great, right? Anyone can learn how to code right now. Anyone can learn how to do their own business. Anyone can learn how to do a stream like this because we have that content. So it is a double-edged sword, and I think that goes back to that abstinence, digital abstinence thing, where we can teach people how to respect the tool, use the tool, and you can set limits for yourself, hopefully, around like, I'm going to use Instagram in this way, I'm going to use Facebook in this way. And you need to be able to have a way of detecting the signs of I'm using this too much. And it might even just be your phone telling you, hey, you're on here 4 hours a day. Guess what? That ends up being a day of your week.
Number of years.
Right.
Right.
And you start adding it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that. So Cami, for you, like when you look at with your clients, with your work, what type of audience are you skewing? I know a little bit about what you do, so you share as much as you want, but are you skewing to an older audience demographic? Do you work with younger? Are you trying to target younger audiences? What is your experience?
Well, it just depends, on the industry, because I work with real estate agents who might be a bit older of a demographic. I work with an automotive shop who could hit anyone from 16 to 65 plus. Mm-hmm. So it varies, but when I write my content, I really try to keep it lighthearted. I don't want to sell people on things, because people aren't necessarily, especially now, sold on things, products, and services. They're sold on other people and maybe what they're doing for the community, who they are as a person.
Yeah.
So in general, I try to keep my philosophy of social media for the good. For one of my realtors, all we really post is community interviews and cool upcoming businesses in the community, influencers in our community, nonprofits, charities. And to me, that's what social media is intended for. We've gotten so far off track. We want to constantly sell people. We want to constantly grab their attention and hold them there for the wrong reasons. And so I really try to gear my content more behind the story and a feeling and a positive message.
Right. So as the audience gets to know who your client is, in the case of this real estate agent, for example, maybe they don't need a house right now. Maybe they aren't looking to sell or buy, but one day in the future they'll need that, and they've created this relationship, which is interesting because you can create this relationship with someone without actually ever having physically met them, right?
Right.
And that it's becoming an interesting thing where I think a lot of people also end up creating like an echo chamber for themselves, where they only follow and subscribe to things that follow their beliefs, whether that's personal, political, whatever. And so then you reinforce all of that. And so I could imagine that it's an interesting conversation with your clients to figure out like, how do we tell authentic stories and get you in front of people, which does involve, I mean I'm on the same boat in terms of the company I work for. We do spend money on ad platforms like Google and Facebook and things like that. And when I watched the movie, I had to think about like, how does that make me feel knowing that we are using the very systems that we're watching right now? But again, I think it's better for someone to get an ad that is more targeted to what they're actually interested in, if it helps them find a product that they didn't know existed, than seeing a bunch of crap that they don't want.
Yeah. And I think it relates back to what you were saying before, where the information that you do want is available, or the people who created the system, they wanted to make the information available that you were looking for, but in hindsight is where they recognize the power that they actually have. And, in the movie did not leave me with the sense of in any way options for a brighter future. It was very much sort of doom and gloom and now, yeah, it
Yeah.
was like, okay, we've pulled back the curtain and there's the wizard, and see ya.
Yeah.
Like, do what you will. Um, yeah,
And
I kind of want to follow up to, all right, and then next step is,
I think there's kind of a way to combat, these algorithms because yes, they are AI, they are artificial intelligence, but they're not necessarily biased. So
mhm.
they do learn from the information that we engage with, from the videos that we watch. So what if we as individuals, as a society, made an effort to halt all political talk? And I know that sounds dramatic and you have to say, well, you have to be informed, but social media is not the place. And I want to bring it back to what it's intended for. I want to log on to Facebook and Instagram and see photos of you and your dog after a hike. I want to see you celebrating your grandma's 100th birthday. I want to see nothing about politics, and it doesn't matter what side you're on. I think we just need to halt the posting in general, anything, sad stories, because we have to almost be dramatic in order to retrain these algorithms to feed us happy, positive content. If you go to post something and in your head you're like, maybe I should fact check this, don't post it at all. There is
Yeah.
so much misinformation out there and it's just rampant. And I think we really need to check ourselves and what we are posting and what we are engaging with, even if we might think, oh, this is harmless, and this is how I feel, this is my opinion. We kind of have to be drastic in the way we retrain these algorithms.
I think,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, is the algorithms are, the AI is completely unbiased. Again,
Right.
all it cares about is that you consume.
Yeah.
well, and so as a developer, I am going to jump in there.
Yes, please.
I think that posting of the content is good. I mean, even yesterday during the debate, I could see a bunch of people posting like photos of their pets to say to cleanse your feed a little bit in this stressful time,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
true.
So
Yeah.
posting good content is definitely one half of the equation, but unfortunately, the code that is written for these things is inherently biased towards whoever writes it. So there's a really good book that Chanel has actually read, and we'll find it and post it in the show notes, about how um, essentially most of the time women and people of color are not represented in that opinion, and therefore they're almost invisible to these algorithms, right? So that and I'll find some examples that we can put in there. I haven't read the book, but the idea is that if it was written by a white guy in San Francisco, there is going to be bias in that, right? But the other bigger bias is when you make an algorithm, you can train it for something, and they literally are training it for time, clicks, things like clickbait, and dollars in terms of ad spend. So unfortunately, if we could actually have an algorithm that tries to be trained towards truth. We could also have an algorithm that's trained towards, well-being, happiness, right? There's still going to be things that aren't necessarily happy all the time that are still important for us to see, but they're trained for clickbait. And unfortunately, in a lot of news, sometimes they'll write a headline that's a little bit more sensational than the truth because they know it's going to get them clicks, and their industry is also really based on ads. So I think there's that last tenet of the movie where they're really trying to push that we need to break up the ad business model from these companies, because when anyone can buy an ad, from Russia buying ads, other countries buying ads with misinformation, most people don't necessarily know that what they're seeing is an ad or an infotainment or an advertainment, all those different things that have been created to help fund news. And so there unfortunately is bias on the tech side. And in the movie, you do see a good example of a number of people who worked on these tools, where they're like, yeah, we had a hand in this, and we don't really want to have a hand in it anymore, and we think we can fix it. But even before that, there were a lot of digital rights activists who were kind of raising that flag, saying something's not right here. We need to fix this. And I would love to see like a Facebook where I could just pay to use it, and there are no ads, because now they're not relying on ads and clicks and all of that, right? I think that's a very different model, and I think a lot of people are willing to give up their data for a free Facebook. That's the other unfortunate reality. But I think giving people a choice, let me pay for it, I don't necessarily want to create two kinds of Facebooks where you have users who are paying for it and users who aren't. And I think that's a whole nother debate.
And then there's
But
a whole economic
yeah,
disparity. Yeah. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah. What if you don't want
Exactly.
to or can't afford to pay for Facebook?
Yeah.
Is it a better Facebook? Is it a faster Facebook? Like those are all things that
Right.
start to break down there. But
The more I pay, the less ads I get. And
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's a very, I thought it was,
I don't think we solved the problem here, but go ahead,
no,
Rachel.
no, there's
I
no
don't think we can.
solution.
There's no, it would take a lot. It would take a lot of bodies, I think, to solve it.
Yeah, it definitely is. One of the people that were featured on there, and I guess she's well known on the subject matter. This was the first time I'd come across her, but her name was Shoshana Zuboff, I think. And she talked about what you're saying, which is the surveillance capitalism. And so if all of that is that ad-based model, and that's the sale, and our attention is the sale, how do we move the commodity, like gold and silver are no longer the high commodities. It's now just human attention. How do we like change that? Or is it reverting that back? Is it replacing it with something else? Yeah, that just struck me, but it might be, we'll put that in the show notes as far as someone to look into. I'm interested. Yeah. She wrote a few books as well, but yeah, I thought that was really, the idea of personal data and how much, what our value is as a human being. Is it just our ad buy, our ad spend on, or our ad value, I guess, on social media,
So I haven't been paying attention to Facebook because I have too many screens in front of me.
But,
so Chanel, actually,
shutting us down.
The book is Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. And then Lindsay Barrett also recommended the book Technically Wrong by Sarah Wachter. So we'll check those out and put them in the show notes. I think we're working on blog posts for each of these episodes that will have some of the links and things that we'll have in there. So these videos are live right now, but we will also be you can watch them if you missed it on Facebook and things like that. So so Jonathan had asked, how are we able to consume news when our attention spans have been trained to be so short? And I think that's another thing, right? Is like everything needs to be reduced to a soundbite, right? There's no critical thinking, no discourse there, because we have to the attention, right? And some people have argued that maybe we should be paid for our attention or paid for our data. But again, at the bottom line, it's like if they're all willing to give it to us for free, why would we pay for it? And so it definitely would require a pretty big sea change in terms of how business is done.
A complete flip.
I'm in.
I think in the meantime, let's all go on hikes when it's not so smoky out. Post pictures.
Get off, stay off Instagram, Facebook past 5. I've been deleting my apps on the weekend. I catch myself getting back on sometimes, and I'm like, no, stay off.
So you actually delete it?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So on my phone, I do not have Facebook on my phone so that I do not get notifications. So I only use the website on my phone. Yeah. I do use Instagram, and I will admit I think I'm addicted to Instagram. So I think that one is one that might need to get a time limit on it, or maybe I need to start using the web version of that.
Just change it on the weekends. It's really refreshing. It really is.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. But
like
I think
instead of a break from technology, it's like just this very specific portion of technology that I need a break from.
Yeah. I mean, I think otherwise, I think most of the other apps, I could obviously be doing Strava instead, and that would be for the benefit, right? But Instagram pulls you back in. I'm sure Facebook would do it if I had it on my phone, but definitely resisting there. So awesome. Well, I think that is going to be time. I think, like I said, we definitely did not solve the problem here. I think it's a bigger problem than all of us, but definitely some steps in that direction. And I think we could easily have talked about each one of these forever, and we plan to. So if you are, we're doing something for Reno Collective members on Friday. If you are around, we're going to be doing a socially distanced outdoor happy hour, pending weather, smoke, and all that. Where we're gonna, where we can obviously talk about whatever we want, but hopefully we're also gonna be talking a little bit about this. And so if you haven't seen it, I do recommend watching it. Watch it, with a grain of salt, knowing that this is has an agenda behind it. It's made by a certain group of people with to push that agenda. So yeah, definitely check it out. And I think, where can people find you if you want them to find you on the internet, Cami? What's your website for anyone who's looking to do social media or just learn more about your business?
Go ahead and go to my Instagram, camgia _, CAMGEA_.
Perfect.
You can check out some of the positive content that I'm creating.
Positive
like
content. She'll send you some more notifications to fill up your day. No.
Yeah, happy one.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Thank
thanks so
you
much,
very
Cami.
much.
And I think that is going to be a wrap for this episode. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you. Tune in next week.
Yes.